Welcome to episode 3 of the Beyond the Guitar podcast, where we help you play the music you love and we talk all things guitar and beyond. I'm Nathan Mills, joined by my co-host, Jeremiah Diaz. Now, Jeremiah is one of the many who's been thrown into this whole work from home situation, right? And so Jeremiah, tell us expectations versus reality. How is this working from home thing playing out?
Oh man. Well, I mean, the first thing is that I didn't expect it to last this long. My company was preemptively saying, "Oh, we're going to do some trial runs and we're going to have people start working from home." And they were doing like a rotating schedule. And this is before anything was mandated by the state of California or anything like that. And then as we were doing these trial runs, it was like, "Oh, no, now actually we're going to be working from home for the next month." And then it's like another 2 weeks or whatever. And now it's like they're pushing it out to like June 8th or whatever. So that's been crazy.
Yeah.
And then, there's the expectation of like, I don't know how much work I'm going to be able to get done for the job that I do. And, it's actually been okay. Mostly I have a lot of hardware that I have to bring home with me, which is really annoying. So I have had to like go back to the office and like reach out to facilities and say like, "Hey, I need access to the building." And anyway, it's just being kind of a pain, to be honest. But other than that, productivity has been okay. It's mostly just like trying not to go insane. And I definitely didn't expect to get a lot of audio projects, what seems like flooding through. And it's none of it's like, paid gigs or any. Well, some of it is paid, but it's mostly like passion projects and like doing stuff with you, and then doing stuff with my band Junko and stuff like that I definitely didn't expect, and that's like caused more work. It's enjoyable work, but it's more work. So I've definitely been overloaded with work in a way that I didn't expect, but it's been rewarding as well. So it's just been a balance between like trying to figure out what to do with work and like family and all that stuff.
Yeah. I feel like it's hit you all at once, and really forced you to kind of, dive into the deep end and figure out how to make it work and be productive and efficient in that new environment. And that's what we wanted to talk about today, with so many people being now thrown into working from home. We wanted to give you some encouragement from our own experiences. Me personally, I've been working from home, at least in some capacity, for the last 5 years. I guess it's probably more like 4 years, but I've been working from home for a long time, and I can kind of share things that have worked well and things that maybe haven't gone so well. But we want to, just talk about productivity tips related to that and work-life balance. And with all of these productivity tips and concepts, one thing that's important to remember is that most of them can be applied directly to how we practice our instruments, right? How we practice the guitar. And so I want you to keep that in mind as we're going through this today, that a lot of times I think we don't necessarily think about how productive or unproductive we necessarily are in our practice. And there's a lot that we can do to make it more efficient and effective. So Jeremiah, I believe you have some questions queued up for us, right?
Yeah, I got a couple questions here from Wimpy Warrior. He's a longtime Beyond the Guitar supporter. Goes all the way back to the crew days, I believe.
Yeah.
Which, RIP crew. But so Wimpy's got a couple in-depth questions for us, and I'll go ahead and start with the first one. So let's see here. I've always been interested in the professional creative process. How do you go about setting yourself attainable/realistic day-to-day or month-to-month goals? How accurately can you estimate how many hours it will take to complete a new project? How do you track your hours? I've always viewed the creative process as something you can't rush, but you can't exactly wait out writer's block if you need to keep cranking out content to keep the lights on.
Yeah, so lots of good, heavy stuff in there. I I wanted to hit first the concept of like, he asked if I tracked my time, and off and on, I've had periods of tracking hours, even like down to tracking my minutes religiously. I only do, it's not something I do consistently, but especially if I'm starting a new project, to kind of keep track of, get a baseline for how long that general activity or task is going to take. Tracking it for a certain amount of time just to give me that reference point. But again, it's not something I do on a regular, like weekly basis. But what I've really embraced is this, it's called Parkinsons Law, to set deadlines and to fit projects into those deadlines rather than seeing how long a project will necessarily take and then trying to plan accordingly. So Parkinson's Law is this concept that work expands to fill the time available for its completion. So it's this kind of ambiguous phenomenon where when I first heard about that, I was kind of skeptical about it, because basically the concept is that if you want to get more work done quicker, just give yourself less time to do it. Right, which kind of sounds, I mean, it sounds obvious, but it also sounds like, there's some point where that's going to be impossible, right? Like, at the end of the day, a task is going to take as long as that task is going to take, and you can't just continue to give yourself less time to do it. But the more I started working through these specific tasks, so to give a very specific example of this, right? When I first started Beyond the Guitar, sometimes I would take 3 weeks to put out a video, from starting the arrangement to practicing it, recording, filming. And at that time I thought, okay, well, this takes 3 weeks. I can't rush it. But over time I got it down to 2 weeks. And then I was sure that it was impossible to get it any quicker than those 2 weeks. But at one point, I decided, I'm going to try to put out a video every week. And when I made that commitment, I found that I was able to do that. Of course, there's going to be times when, certain things come up and you can't always stick with it religiously. But I did find that there was a lot of truth to this concept, because what happens is when you have that urgency of these shorter deadlines, it changes how you work. Right. So you have this sense of urgency. So you focus on the important things, and you don't mess around with things that you might otherwise, if you had this kind of seemingly endless amount of time with these long, lofty deadlines, it changes what you prioritize. Right.
Yeah, definitely. I love this idea because I've completed a lot of audio projects that I've been paid for, whether they be, audio editing or sound design or music composition, whatever it is. I've been paid for these projects and they've taken a certain amount of time, and I always have a deadline for them, and I always get them in on time. And sometimes I'm, cramming or, whatever to try and make the deadline, but I always get it done and the client is always happy. And the hardest part for me as an artist is to release my own stuff at a quick turnaround pace. Like I haven't barely released anything. And that's the thing I'm working on. That's what I mentioned in the first podcast. That's the new goal for myself, is to try and release more stuff. And that's one of the things that's been crazy about this whole time, is that I have, now released a EP with my band Junko. My buddy Andrew is, he wrote a bunch of stuff. I wrote a bunch of ambient synth and guitar stuff, and then I added synth stuff and mixed and mastered it. And I wasn't even working on it every day because I had other priorities and other things I had to do, spend time with family, other work, and all that stuff. And then with you, Nathan, we produced the intro / outro song for this podcast, and I mixed and mastered it, and we put it out. And Yeah, man, it's just it's crazy how you're I don't know, you really are able to like get things done when there's a deadline and you're focused and disciplined about getting it done. The hardest part is for me as an artist is mostly just like being willing to let things go as imperfect as I think they might be. That's like the hardest part about it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's just with the arts in general and music, it's so easy to fall into that perfection trap. You know, I think it's something that we're always pursuing, but the reality of it is we can't just sit around and wait for things to be perfect and continue to tweak and tweak. Like, I feel like gone are the days where you can be a musician who just, that mysterious musician who disappears for 10 years and then comes out with this like masterpiece album, you know, like
Yeah.
it's just not, that's not how things work. Like we need to be putting out content. And to kind of piggyback off of what you were saying there, related to the Parkinson's Law, about these quick deadlines, one thing that you really have to leverage with that, and something that I've been really thinking about and constantly analyzing in my own work, is this other concept, the 80-20 rule, or the Pareto Principle, which I feel like if I just throw out enough of these terms, it just automatically makes me sound like I really know what I'm talking about. So I'm gonna keep throwing keep name dropping.
I don't know what you're
these
saying.
things. Yeah, the Pareto Principle. But so this thing, you hear this popping up in tons of different areas, and it has a ton of applications. But the concept here is that 80% of the results come from 20% of your effort. So if we apply that, for example, to an arrangement that I'm making, right, the 20% of the work that I put into this gets me 80% of the way there to this completed project, right? Completed product. But I can sit there and tweak and tweak and tweak and nitpick all these little details that might get me that extra little 20% that most people won't even notice, but it requires 80% extra effort on my end. So the concept is that we have to essentially be okay to miss out on that extra 20% that, yes, maybe might make it better and closer to that, ultimately unattainable perfect goal. But at the end of the day, it's more important for us to put stuff out there into the world at a more frequent rate than to chase this, again, unattainable, perfection.
Yeah, and to go along with that, I think, if you're someone who has lack of confidence in the amount of skill you have in your instrument or in the music you produce or in the art you produce or whatever it is that you're producing, I think it's nice to know that over time things will get better if you're putting in the work. And it's kind of what you mentioned, Nathan, I think I don't remember if it was the last podcast or the first one, but you mentioned like going back and looking at people's YouTube channels, like from, when they first started out, including your own, and seeing that, like, look, man, you just put content out there and like keep putting in the work and things will improve over time. And I think you do, you do want to make sure that you're like practicing things correctly and improving your skills in a disciplined manner, and you're not kind of chaotically trying to, improve on things. But I think it's comforting to know that even if you look back on your work and you're like, oh man, I can't believe I put that out there. Like hopefully over time you'll see improvement even in your own stuff. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, if you're not putting stuff out there, you're not going to get better. Another part of that question too, that Wimpy brought up was, he feels like the creative process isn't something that you can rush. So how do you kind of operate in a world where you're in a creative field, but you also have deadlines? So you have to constantly be pushing stuff out there. And And so, yeah, I'm in a scenario where, I can't just wait for inspiration to strike. In a sense, you kind of have to create it. And so if I think about the equivalent of writer's block for what, I might experience with arranging, right? I get to a section in a piece that I'm working on and I'm just stuck. I don't feel like anything. I don't really like any of the ideas that are coming out. One thing that I do to, in a sense, like force that inspiration and try to come up with some idea that I can really run with is I force myself to flesh out an idea, even if it's terrible and I don't like it, right? I force myself to just work through some iteration of what could work for this section of music, and I notate it down. And then what I do is I treat this like an exercise where I force myself to take that same section and work it out in a different context or with a different technique. So I'll explore what that might look like with tremolo technique or with harmonics or some type of arpeggio or different rhythm. And even if I still don't like any of those end results, generally what happens is through that process, you find some sort of inspiration, right? Some idea, starts to take off, whether it is one of those specific techniques or contexts that I explore that works out really well, or it just, things have a way of striking some type of idea just as you're exploring these things. And so it's a matter of not sitting around and just waiting for it, but actually kind of putting pen to paper, so to speak, and forcing yourself to write through something and then, ripping that paper out and going again. And through that process, that inspiration comes. Because again, we can't just wait for it.
Yeah. For me, when I have a deadline and I'm having a hard time with the project, usually what I do is I will leave it alone for a few days if I have the time. Like, let's say I have a deadline in a week or 2 weeks or something, because usually it's like something like I have to put music or sound design to a commercial or a short film or something. So the deadlines can vary for me. But if I'm like daunted by it, if I'm like, oh man, this is gonna be rough, I usually will just think about it a lot and think about how I'm gonna approach it, like what kind of style I want to do, what kind of instrumentation. And usually I'm able to kind of envision something in my mind about like, oh, I want strings here, or I want piano, or I want heavy percussion, or synths, or like, some kind of synthy vibe, or, whatever it may be. And then I start from that point and I tackle it that way. And usually it works out for me. And Nathan, you probably know from school, you and I both work really well under pressure. So
right.
Once I get rolling, I go. And usually I'm able to stay up as late as I need to if I'm cramming on a last minute thing. My poor wife, sometimes I'm up till like 3 a.m.
Right.
And I submit a project and it gets done. I don't enjoy it necessarily, but I do like get satisfaction in the fact that I'm able to work that way. Of course, then I have to go to my day job the next day and I'm a zombie, but
but it's worth it. It's worth it. And yeah, I mean, momentum is a powerful thing, so once you get that going,
yeah, that's the key.
And you break through whatever obstacles, keeping it rolling is a lot easier than getting it started in the first place.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
It's kind of like who was it? Was it Michelangelo or Da Vinci?
Oh my gosh.
Like they said they just no, sorry. It's like a famous story. They said they just like stared at a block for like a really long time. And it was like days or months. I'm going to butcher this story, but they
it's
like,
all right. You're a scholar, just own it. Yeah.
Yeah. But they like, one of them stared at a block of granite or whatever it is. And like, just like studied it for like a really long time. Yeah. And then they carved David out of it. I don't know. Anyway, right. But that's kind of like
Michelangelo's David. So it must be Michelangelo.
It must be, yeah. I'm not comparing myself to Michelangelo.
Well,
but
you should. Yeah.
yeah,
I've heard you are the Michelangelo of our generation of lo-fi. You just envision the waveforms and they just form themselves.
Oh man. Anyway, yeah. No, I sound really pretentious now. Anyway, all I'm trying to say is I relate to that story.
It is, yeah. It's a good story. Jeremiah was the most studious in our high school, so
no. Voted fitting. Most studious. I was, but I was not the most studious. I used to cheat off of Nathan's spelling tests.
Yeah, he did.
Freshman year.
I was not aware of this. Otherwise, I would have not allowed such debauchery.
I was never a good speller.
Well, you got good grades thanks to me.
Well, just the spelling tests. Yeah. Everything else was me. I think.
Oh my goodness. Well, on that note, so I think if memory serves, Wimpy had kind of a part 2 of that question, right?
Yeah. So Wimpy followed up with, you've been making a living out of your home studio for a while. And now a lot of us are suddenly forced to turn our homes into our offices and figure out how to balance our lives with working from home. How do you stay focused during working hours, quote unquote, and how do you pull yourself away when the day is over? Yeah. This is a hard one.
It is. Yeah. I mean, this kind of, I actually meant to give a blanket disclaimer before we started this. I wanted to talk about the fact that, all of these concepts as far as productivity and focus and work-life balance, these are ongoing disciplines that I most certainly don't always follow. Sometimes I knowingly break, all these rules of productivity that I've learned, just out of sheer laziness. Some days you just don't feel it. And even though you know what you should do in a given scenario, you just don't do it. But it's something that you continuously work on improving. And I think a lot of people aren't necessarily open about that. I mean, I think they make it seem like it's easy. But over time, I feel like I've grown more confident in my abilities and my own productivity and as a person overall, not because I've gotten my life more together necessarily, but because I've realized that most everybody else is just as big of a mess as I am. Yeah. They just don't want you to know that, right? We all want people to see the best of ourselves and to put our best foot forward, but we're all just figuring out life as we go. So that's why we need these productivity systems like this to help weed out the distractions and to keep us focused. So with that being said, there are definitely things that I do put in place and that I try to follow on a regular basis. So if we're talking related to his question, the focus aspect of it, right? How do I stay focused in a work from home environment specifically? One of the things that I put into place both with work and I recommend this for practice as well is another fancy term here is the pomodoro technique, right? So this is for where you take a timer and you set it for 25 minutes, and that's 25 minutes of intense focus, and then you give yourself 5 minutes of rest after that, right? So it's simple, but the concept is that we're more capable of intense focus for pockets of time, right? And so we're not just letting work just go and go and go, because then we fall into that trap of busyness versus productivity, right? Where we feel like we're being productive, but we get more and more distracted and potentially doing tasks that are less and less important. So same thing with practice, right? After 25 minutes or so goes by, depending on your, attention span, but generally a certain amount of time like that starts to go by and we start kind of noodling and messing around and we become much less efficient. So something like this is super important. And I recommend as well, because, our phones are the death of all things productive, right? I think we can all admit that. So there is some danger because our natural tendency is to just set a timer on our phone. I do recommend a designated timer, like a physical old school timer or whatever, so that you don't have your phone right there. There's actually I saw somebody talking about this. There's this cool dice timer where you literally just like flip it over to whatever side it has for, one side will be 5 minutes, the next side is 15, 10, whatever. Kind of a cool concept. I don't have one, but I recommend it. It looks cool.
That sounds pretty cool.
Right?
I wouldn't mind. I wouldn't mind one of those.
I actually saw, that's who it was. It was Evan Taucher on Instagram. He's a great guitarist. He talks about how he uses it in his guitar practice, and he just kicks it over with his feet. So he doesn't even he's just all business. He's got his hands on the guitar. He just flips the timer over with his foot. It's awesome.
Nice. That helps in the not having to, grab your phone and mess with it and set a new timer and put it down.
Right.
Laziness is key, I think.
Yeah. Laziness
and efficiency are tied together very interestingly, I've found.
Tell us more.
Well, if if you have your phone on the other side of the room or in another room, or sometimes this is weird. Sometimes I'll need to go to the restroom, but I'm so focused on what I'm doing for a project that I just I wait because I don't want to be bothered to get up and go to the restroom. That might be TMI, but
you just absorb it. That's just productivity 101.
Yeah, but then I get worried about those South Koreans that die playing StarCraft or whatever for too many hours, or World of Warcraft.
Yeah, I think there's a balance, right?
Yeah, it's true.
That's huge, because that's another one of these fancy little rules, right? It's called the 20-second rule, which I've always taught some version of this to my students, but I never realized that there was an official kind of term that was coined by Sean Aker in his book, The Happiness Advantage. The concept is that you want to decrease the effort that it takes to start a task to 20 seconds or less, right? So whatever habit you're trying to form or whatever productive task you're trying to do, you want to make it as convenient as possible to start that task. And then on the flip side, whatever distractions or non-productive tasks that tend to call for your attention, you want to make those more inconvenient, right? To where they take potentially more than 20 seconds to start. And that's what you were hitting on there exactly.
Yeah.
And that's, like you said, it's all about laziness, right? Ultimately, we're lazy, so we need to set up our environments in a way that can, do us some favors. I had a student.
It's honest. Oh, go ahead.
Well, just the student of mine had this brilliant idea where, so generally, a practical way to apply this, right, is just have your guitar within arm's reach at all times, right? Like if you're working from home, you have your guitar on a stand next to your desk, so pockets throughout the day, if you have a break or something, you can just grab it and go, and it's a great way to get some guaranteed practice. So a student of mine said he had this idea he would actually keep his guitar in his case, but he was a gamer, so I definitely related to this. He's got the temptation to, should I play some video games or should I get some practice in? He would put his PlayStation controller in his guitar case under the guitar's neck. So if he wanted to play video games, he physically had to pick his guitar up to reach in and get the controller. And I just thought that was brilliant, because you think about how we justify things that we do, for good or bad. I was just imagining that inner dialogue you have with yourself, trying to justify not practicing and playing video games when you literally have your guitar in your hand to grab that controller. I thought that was amazing.
That's really clever, man. I was going to mention, it's kind of like what you said about momentum. It's like inertia. I feel like once you start doing something, whether it's work or something else, your mind or your body, well, as long as you're enjoying the work to some extent, because I definitely don't experience this kind of inertia with my day job. But I feel like whenever I get started on a project that I'm into, and typically for audio stuff, like even if it's not like the greatest thing in the world, I'm usually very focused for whatever reason. But my workspace is in a very shallow, very wide closet in my wife and I's bedroom. Right. So what tends to happen is there's curtains that we have to close the closet, and you can't see any of my stuff. But there's a chair on it, and a lot of times what will happen is laundry gets put on that chair. And if there's laundry on that chair, chances are I am not sitting down and working.
Right? Isn't that crazy?
Anything unless there's a deadline and I'm getting paid. But yeah, dude, the laundry is the worst. So
true, and that's all it takes, right?
It's the worst. But like I said, once I get going, it's like I don't know. I get in the zone, and it's really hard for me to stop working, and sometimes it's bad. But yeah, like I said, with my day job, it's a much different story. Staying focused on that is like, that's a hard one.
Yeah, I mean, I think
Wimpy's gonna have to help me out on that one. I don't know.
There you go. Yeah, we'll take some help on that. But yeah, that's, it's that barrier of entry. Like, I always talk about this with the guitar, right? Just getting that guitar in your hands is the biggest thing. Like if you've had a long day at work, you're stressed, you're tired, you just want to watch some Netflix. Once you actually pick up the guitar, if you can make that happen, you're probably going to practice for longer than you had anticipated, right? And it solves that. Or same thing like, going to the gym, like we dread going to the gym, but once you actually get there, like it's fine. So that is huge, and it can take that's why it's so important to set up your environment in a way that it makes those distractions harder to do, and it makes those productive things easier to do, because it's as little as something as just laundry in a chair that can totally throw us off.
Yeah, and recently I kind of wanted to start being more comfortable on guitar, because I can learn a song and like play it well, as long as it doesn't have like anything super crazy, like if you, let's say like a backing track for like vocals or whatever. Like my wife sings, and sometimes we'll play stuff for people. So what I've been doing now is like I said, we live in a 2-bedroom apartment. Having a guitar case out in the living room is like a huge obstacle with the amount of space that we have.
Sure, yeah.
But I've been forcing myself to like leave it out there so that it's there, and I'm like, I don't have to go like in my bedroom and grab it and like bring it out and like move stuff, Yeah. And then I just take it out and like start practicing like, random like jazz chords or whatever, because I want to start incorporating more guitar into like music that I make.
Right.
But yeah, so it's like it has really helped just having it out there in the living room as opposed to having it in our bedroom, which is where it was before.
Right. Yeah, I mean, and that's the exact example that Sean Aker gives in his book, talking about the 20-second rule. He related it back to guitar, and how he had his guitar in a closet, in the case in the other room, and he just couldn't get on a roll of practicing regularly. And that was the same exact change that he made. So it's simple, but I think we give ourselves too much credit for our own self-discipline. So like we think something like that.
We're terrible people.
Well, no, just, I mean, everybody struggles with this, and so
I know.
They think that we think that like, you hear something like this and you're like, well, that's obvious. Like having it near you, of course you're going to whatever. That's not really a thing. What are you going to call that? The 20-second rule? Like it's some brilliant discovery, but it's so true.
Yeah,
like it's just
it's a sad reality of the state of humanity.
Exactly,
it's just who we are.
We are lazy people, and so man. For me, my biggest downfall is my phone, and so to use the 20-second rule for me is throwing my phone on the opposite side of the house, as far away from me as possible, because if it's within arm's reach, and this is what I want to talk about next, I'm going to pick it up and just check throughout the day, random things, social media. And so that leads me to my next recommendation for staying focused, working at home when you have less supervision and you can kind of get away with more things and there's more temptations. I've turned off all of my phone's notifications. The only sound that my phone makes is a text message. I will get text, but let's be honest, I don't have too many people texting me. And phone calls, right? I only get texts and phone calls. And I mean, phones, we all know this, phones are designed to be addictive, right? Like the notification sounds, they all have their unique thing, and you get that, and it's like this little dopamine drip that
the phantom buzzing in your pocket when your phone isn't in your pocket.
That's when you got a problem, right?
Yeah.
And so I actually came across something today. So it's phones, they really are ingeniously designed to be addictive. I was reading something today. I'm going to pull it up here real quick. They were talking about Twitter specifically, and they have this, it's another fancy term here. It's the variable ratio schedule. So the specific example here is that when you swipe your finger down on Twitter, a spinning wheel, right, comes up and it indicates that the app is loading more content. And so the catch is that you don't know what you're getting, but you're hoping that you see something new and something interesting. So you kind of wait for that wheel to go. And it's this addictive thing. You swipe, and maybe later you check again, you swipe, you see that wheel going, and all these little things that they didn't have to include that wheel, right? I mean, just things like that it's just ingeniously designed to keep you coming back to it. And so this ties into both parts of Wimpy's thing, right? The focus during work and the work-life balance, being able to shut off work after it's done, assuming that your job relates, if you use your phone in any capacity at work, like for emails or things like that, if you don't have any dings going off on your phone for work email or just social media related stuff, you're less likely to then go grab it when work is supposed to be over, right? And you're more there and more intentional with your family. Yeah,
man, I have no problem shutting off for my day job, as I said, and hopefully this doesn't get old. But yeah, I have no problem shutting off from my day job. But what's hard is that I am trying to, build a career outside of that, and that's where it gets really tough, trying to balance work and life.
Yeah.
And one recommendation I have is just clear communication, and this is kind of something that my wife requested of me, is I just want to know when you're going to be busy. That's fine. Just tell me when you're going to be busy, and we'll plan for it. And usually I'm working after my boys go to bed, and I just as long as I'm clear with communication. Obviously, if you're single, it's not going to be a huge problem. It's mostly just about your own health and how much you want to spend working.
Right.
That's probably the biggest thing for me as far as the balance part is I just need to have clear communication and just not overload my schedule to the point where I'm not spending any time with my family or my wife after hours or whatever the case may be.
Yeah. It's really hard to completely shut off, especially when it is something work that you're passionate about and work that technically never ends, right? There's always something that I could be doing to continue to push the needle forward. It's not something that, if I just clock out, I clock out because all the work is done, right? It's never done. And what you said is so important, and that's something that we are still working on in our family, with my wife, that communication. And that's something I wanted to touch on, because I think a lot of people are running into these cases where when you are working from home, one of the best things that you can do for yourself is to set clear physical boundaries, right? Where you have a designated workspace that's away from the rest of the family. So you essentially are going to work, and when you clock out, you're leaving work and going back to the rest of the, to be with the rest of the family. And that's really helpful, but that's not something that a luxury that everybody has. You might not have that space. And so when you don't have that space, it becomes, extra important that you have set up those boundaries, by communicating your availability with your family, right? And that's exactly what you were talking about, where you say, you can expect me to be present and to be with you and the kids from this time to this time. And on the flip side, I need you to understand that I'm going to be unavailable as if I was away at the office from this time to this time, so that, there won't be distractions and things like that. And setting up communicating those very clearly so that nobody's kind of getting the short end of the stick or caught off guard. And that's something, because I'll be honest, we still kind of struggle with setting those clear boundaries, because my transition into working from home has been gradual, right? I've increasingly worked from home, doing just all the YouTube stuff and the content creation and just my private in-home studio. As that's grown, I've had to go out of the home and work out of the home less, right? And to the point where now I'm 100% working from home. And so because it happened so gradually, we didn't really set those clear boundaries at first. And so now it's so easy for me to just go upstairs real quick and hang out with them and say hi, or for my wife, Becca, to just text me and say, hey, come here real quick. And little things that, on the surface, they don't seem like a big deal, but especially if you're in the middle, like we talked about momentum, right? If you're in the middle of a creative process and you're kind of on a roll, even if you're technically only spending a couple minutes away from that, it disrupts that momentum. And so, it works both ways. It's both parties' responsibilities to communicate and to follow through. But that is so important. Yeah, you hit the nail on the head there, communicating. Yeah,
and I definitely still struggle with it. So I feel like it's going to be a work in progress for ever, probably. Yeah, I think the hardest part is like my own gauge for how long something is going to take. I'll be like, okay, I'm going to be working this time, and I'll be done by like 10 p.m.
Oh yeah, we're always optimistic about that.
Then Grace always tells me, Grace is my wife, she always tells me like, yeah, right, you're not going to be done by 10. I'm like, you're maybe, I don't know. And then usually she's right. But what can I say?
Yeah.
This is one thing I was going to mention. Sorry, Nathan, to cut you off. You mentioned having dedicated spaces, and that's been a big hurdle for us. Because like I said, my audio, I have to keep my audio stuff in our long or wide closet. And it's not like I said, it's not like a walk-in closet. It's like a closet. It's just really wide and a couple feet deep, so I'm able to fit a narrow desk and my monitor's there. But what I was going to say was that, sometimes like if I'm working late on a project, my wife has to go to sleep, so I'll take my laptop and I'll work in the living room. And yeah, man, it's a trip, because it's like having to share my workspace with the rest of the family, and it sucks because it feels like there isn't a place where I can go to where I'm like, oh man, like I feel like I need to like do work on a project or something. And then there's other factors that come in as well for me, like when I'm mixing audio or mastering or anything like that. Not having my monitors, and like if I'm plugged in directly to my headphone jack and I'm sitting on the couch, the bass response is much weaker when you plugged in directly to the headphone jack. So there's things that I have to account for. So yeah, it's crazy, and we can talk more about that in another podcast if listeners are interested in audio tips and whatnot. But anyway, yeah, just not having a dedicated space is rough for everyone. But my wife is very gracious. I can't think of another word. Her name's Grace, but no pun intended.
Apropos.
She's been very supportive and gracious, and And so anyway, it's a work in progress. Hopefully we'll find a place where we can move to that has a little bit more space though.
Yeah, well, I think we should definitely talk about that more in depth on a dedicated episode, because I think that
you mean the audio side of things?
Yeah, because that's one of the, I think there's a lot of encouragement that you can provide there, because anybody that hears what you put out, it is great quality work, right? It sounds incredible, and that's an important thing for people to know, is that we get obsessed about gear, and we get obsessed about, a perfect acoustically treated area, and just all these different things, and having the right monitors and all these things, and you can still make great music in less than ideal environments. And so I think that's definitely an episode in and of itself. But
yeah, the most important tool that we have is our ears. That I've been told that multiple times by multiple instructors in college. But we can definitely. I would love to talk about that if people are down.
That'd be a lot of fun. I'm sure people would be really interested in that. And so, for those of you who can afford a designated space, this is still important for people who are, single and don't necessarily have a family living there with you, or roommates, or, if you're living by yourself, having a designated space, however small, but a place that you go to work and that you leave when you're done is important, because, I do have a designated place to work. I have a studio down kind of in the basement of my home, and the problem for me is, I do have that physical separation from the rest of my family, but this is also where I come to quote play, right? This is where my play video games. At the end of the day, the kids are in bed. I want to kind of unwind. I sit at my desk and I play video games, but my computer is right there. I can just turn and shoot out a quick email or respond to some comments real quick. And so that makes it also hard to shut off. And so talking about that work-life balance, it is important to, for your own sake, like Jeremiah kind of said, for your own health and your ability to focus the next day, right? You need to be able to shut things off. And so, for when it is possible, make that effort to also have those physical boundaries wherever possible. But I wanted to hit on one more thing, talking about turning off all phone notifications and everything. One of the most depressing things, Jeremiah, do you have screen time enabled on your phone?
Oh yeah, dude, that's not good.
Yeah.
Dude, it is shot up wildly since the quarantine. It's really bad.
Yeah, there's probably there's also a correlation working from home too, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's depressing because it's, what is it, every Sunday? I don't know if it's different for other people, but for me, it's every Sunday you get that little thing. It's like, oh, you're up 20% from, it's like,
oh my gosh.
But what's even more, and this is why I think disabling the notifications is so crucial, because to me, what's more depressing than the overall time is the number of pickups, right? So it even tracks how many times you pick up your phone throughout the day. And that's crazy.
To be honest, I don't even look at it. I just look at it. I'm like, oh my, I clear it out. I'm like, I don't want to see this.
Yeah, out of sight, out of mind. Yeah, and I mean, we go to our phones all the time, and so really, if there was just one productivity tip, like for myself to hear, right, and for anybody else out there to hear, it's really just learning how to like detach yourself from your phones, because they are toxic.
Yeah.
Unless you're listening to us right now on your phone, then hold it close, but then throw it far away. Bluetooth or
plug it into your car or whatever.
That's right. 20 seconds
and then chuck it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. I guess another thing that I had here too, and this is something that you've probably heard, and it's batching, right? Batching is a productivity tool that's pretty straightforward, right? Batch your email. If you are in this kind of social media world, batching your social media related, engagement. Because this also, it's obvious how this applies to productivity, right? If we do all our tasks at one time, there's certain things like whatever it takes to start that task, like we don't have to multiply the time it takes to start it and finish it, things like that. But it also plays into the work-life balance. I've found personally, because when I get lazy on this and I get into this habit of checking my email throughout the day, or checking, my little dopamine drip, checking, who commented, who liked. Like if I check that throughout the day, it's hard to shut that off. And so then you're more likely to, after work, just real quick, check some email, or real quick, check your social media. So if you set up that discipline to where, after lunch, that's my email time, and then I'm going to have maybe an hour where I go in and respond to comments and, make certain social media posts, and there's designated times for that, then it's going to be easier for me when work is done to not just as a habit go into it. Because talking about how often we pick up our phones, it really does just become instinctive, right? I've had those embarrassing moments where I'll pick up my phone, hit an app, realize there's nothing new, close out of it without even thinking, hit that same app again. Right? Yeah. It's terrible.
I'll do this thing where my phone is black and my case is black, and I'll purposefully put my phone screen down so I don't see any notifications or anything, and then I'll forget about it. And then I'll be like, oh, my phone, I wonder if I got any texts or whatever. And then I'll tap the back side of my phone. I'll tap the case side of my phone, thinking like my screen's going to light up. Like, wait, that's not my screen. That's the back of my case. And then I'm like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's just like our brain.
What is wrong with me?
Yeah, it's like we don't even need our brains involved in handling the phone. It's just we're just all thumbs.
We're all drones, man.
So
everybody's a drone.
Cut yourselves off from the machine. But yeah, again, like I said, the blanket disclaimer, right? It's something that we're all working on, and there've definitely been, I kind of geek out on productivity stuff. I think it's really interesting, but sometimes I'll watch some of these productivity gurus who they make it sound like they're just perfect. They've got everything lined up, and their days are structured just exactly how they want them to go. And I think I'm not discounting that a lot of them are definitely more productive, than I am, and more disciplined in those ways. But, it's just life just doesn't always go the way it's planned. And so that's kind of just built into our days. Things are going to happen, we're going to falter, we're going to feel lazy sometimes. And so I guess I just want to maybe encourage you a little bit to, if you're feeling like with this whole new normal that we're all going through, that you don't have everything all together. I think maybe the moral here is that you're not the only one, and we're all here trying to put these systems in place to be more productive. And again, I definitely don't have it all figured out, but I look at my output and things that I create, and I'm still able to be a productive person without being a, productivity machine,
Yeah, man, definitely something I've been working on for the last few years, trying to be more productive, be more efficient, separate all these things, work-life balance, all that stuff. But, it's definitely a work in progress. Yeah. But hopefully the trend is upward.
That's right. And hopefully this gives you listening some ideas as far as how to navigate this new normal again. And, if you are, working from home, and hopefully this gives you some ideas on how to stay focused and how to be more productive in your work and in your practice, as well as navigating that work-life balance to make sure that you are there present for your families, or at the very least for your own sake, for your own rest and your own recuperation, so that you can be then focused the next day. But I think that's a good place to wrap it up.
Hold on. I will say, I work with a lot of engineers. If you're an engineer, go to sleep or do something else. Stop responding to emails at 2 a.m.
Right, exactly.
Just go to
Shut it
sleep.
off.
Disconnect.
That's right. Yeah.
Sorry, Nate. You can wrap it up now.
That's right. So on that note, you can find me everywhere beyond the guitar on all of the social medias. If you want to learn how to make your own classical or fingerstyle guitar arrangements, you can go to my website, beyondtheguitar.com, and take my free training, Fretboard Freedom, to get started. Jeremiah, let us know where everybody can find you.
Yeah, man. You can find me, just search for Chomachi, Chomachi. I'm on YouTube, I'm on Instagram, I'm on Spotify and Apple Music. Got a single track out right now, but we'll have more soon, hopefully in the next few weeks. Nathan and I have got the collaboration that you hear on this podcast. That's he and I. We'll be releasing that shortly. And then I just wrapped up a project with my buddy Andrew. We're in a band called Junko, Junco, and we just released a ambient EP. So it's like guitar, ambient noise, and synths and stuff, just kind of things that you can fall asleep to.
Yeah,
during
really
this
excited for that.
Corona time. It's called Corona. I can't even say it. It's called Corona Ambient EP. It's a little bit tongue in cheek, but it's cool. I think you guys will enjoy it.
Very relevant. No, I'm really excited about that. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for listening. If you're listening on Apple Podcast, leave us a rating and a review. If you have a moment, it helps a ton. But again, we appreciate you. Much love, and we'll see you in the next one.